Okay, well, good evening, everybody. Hope everyone is okay. Hope everyone's cool. I mean, it is sweltering in my office at the moment. Doesn't help that blinds are closed, windows closed, computer is just kicking out all sorts of heat as I've turned the fans down a little bit. But anyway, I do appreciate for those of you that are here. I also appreciate that most people will probably be enjoying their bank holiday, and we usually do this on a Tuesday. But I'm out of the country for a few days tomorrow, so this is really the only time I could do it. And again, it's a bit of a weird day to do it, I suppose, because markets are closed. You know, we've got a bank holiday in the UK, we've got a bank holiday in America. We did have the futures open a little bit today, we'll talk about, but you know, it's been just basically Bitcoin, well, and crypto that has been able to move over the last 3 days. And with some, rumblings from good old Donald Trump about maybe finding some actual resolutions to the Middle East, we have seen a little bit of an uptick following the end of last week where Bitcoin's price was falling. So we're going to kind of cover all of that, have a look at how the futures markets has held up, what we can potentially expect for the remainder of this week, and kind of give an idea of just generally where I feel the market is. So I suppose without any further ado, let's just jump straight in. And on the 3-day time frame, there's two interesting things for me for Bitcoin on the 3-day time frame. I'll just make it a little bit larger. That's not Bitcoin, that's BitTensor. There we go. So one, this move down, the move down that we had came all the way down to 74,000. We talked about that quite a lot over the last sort of 10 days. Looking at where 74 might be a bottom and how we would react from that. And to be fair, it has had a very strong bounce from that 74,000 level. What we were looking for was it to either bounce from that level, or if it closed below on the daily time frame, we were probably going to see back into the 60s. We've kind of had a little bit of a decision on that. Now, caveat it with the fact that nothing else has been open over the weekend, so this could reverse and we should sort of wait. But the other interesting thing is, despite the move that we've had, actually, since losing 78,000, we've not really been able to get above that. And when we look on other timeframes, there's going to be a lot of things in and around that 78,000 that may be holding us back. And so I really kind of see that as almost the next battleground. And that will kind of lead into potential decisions for me in the next sort of 5 or 6 days as to where I think the market's going and what that might mean for what I'm going to do. But yeah, the question I suppose we really want to be asking is, has this trip down to 74,000, is that effectively our journey down to the bottom of this range? And what we're actually seeing now is that movement back up, because the difference between 74,000 and 73,000, where this line was, it is $1,000. I accept that, but it's kind of incidental in the grand scheme of things. And so we just have to be cautious. I suppose that waiting for us to always perfectly hit this level could be a little bit of a false sort of proposition, if you will. And maybe we just have to accept that actually maybe this is as far as low down as we go. That being said, obviously nothing goes down in a straight line. After some continuous falling into the red, we do see some form of recovery. And so that journey north, if that starts to fail, stall, whatever, then actually we might see that follow through. But on the 3-day time frame, it only takes a couple more 3-day candles before actually this white line comes up to the level that we were at. So we just need to really be quite cautious as to how we're playing this down here. Not being too greedy, but also obviously not just reacting to every pump it is that we see. We'll go into that in a little bit more detail later on. I don't know why BitTensor is on every single one of the charts. NASDAQ hitting all-time highs today. Remember, this is actually just the futures. I've mentioned the markets were closed today. The futures is now actually closed, and it will reopen at 11 o'clock. But tonight, it'll open at 11 o'clock tonight. But today, we have had that move up. We didn't quite get to 30,000. We were close. We joked about hitting 30,000 before June. Kind of feel that's on the cards at the moment. And we're going to have a look at sort of NASDAQ and S&P in terms of what this may mean for the rest of the marketplace. The only thing that obviously stands out at the moment is, because only the futures was open today, there is a gap. Potentially that gap could be filled with the market opening tomorrow. So maybe expect a little bit of volatility, but even a pullback to sort of 29,500, it's not exactly a huge drop off before the markets recover. And, this news article, well, not this particular news article, but this, whole conversation at the moment is really, in my opinion, going to steer how the markets are moving. Old Trump doing what he does best, getting up on social media, posting an incredibly long Truth Social post. I don't think it's in here. It's not. I won't bother finding it. But it basically just saying that negotiations are well advanced. They're in the final stages and expecting an immediate resolution to mainly, he said, the Strait of Hormuz, but ultimately the ongoing conflict in Iran. Now, Iran have a different take to that, and whilst they are agreeing that they are making strides to war, their wording is a deal is a long way off. Now, of course, both parties are going to kind of say that because, they're still trying to negotiate things. So each one of them wants to look strong. But the point being that actually, if we actually do get that resolution, I do believe the markets are going to move. I do believe that NASDAQ is going to move. And as overextended as this may look, and again, we'll look at it with some other things later on, it doesn't necessarily mean that this has to fall over now. Yes, it does look overextended, but the old adage of the market can stay irrational longer than you can stay solvent. I wouldn't be trying to short this yet. Matter of fact, the better thing to do would just be, if you need to get in, you need to scratch that itch, is just monitor it, but just go with the momentum at the moment. The momentum is north. And as I say, if we do get some sort of positive resolution to the Iran situation, I think the markets are going to fly. We'll have a look at some other metrics on that a little bit later on. Total 2, it's had its bounce as well, which is basically mirroring Bitcoin. Nothing really to say there, hovering in around that $1 trillion mark. And then we've had BitTensor. And BitTensor's had a bit of an interesting one, I suppose, because it has been a little bit more volatile. And not on this chart, on one of the other charts, we have a white line going across at 250 level, or 257, I think it is. We've kind of come back down to that level a couple of times, but we've had some fairly decent bounces from that. And at the moment, we're sort of sticking the landing above this yellow line, which we've sort of hesitated from. So I think there is an element of relative positivity at the moment for that. Again, I do believe that Bitcoin is king. So how that plays out, I think will have an impact on most other cryptocurrencies, and whether or not BitTensor is one of them. But generally, we would think that is the case. But right now, sitting at 280, nothing wrong with that. We want to see it re-challenge this wick it's formed from the last candle at 295, which was the Gandalf line we'll have a look at later on. Story hasn't really changed, to be honest with you. Nothing to get too worried about or too excited about. The worry is we lose to 254, 255. Let's just go 250 as a round number. The excitement we get above the Gandalf line. We can be excited once again. And then we kind of have a look with some, 12-hour time frame, the good old fib on there and some liquidity zones. And it's a bit of a mess, but that's because price action actually came in and around a lot of things at the same time over the weekend. So what we've kind of seen last week was this failed 3-top from the 1.272, and then after 3 attempt failures with sort of lower highs each time, the more logical solution was going to be this is going to come back and retest that $74,000 level, which it did. Okay, it was $100 off, but it came back down to there. There was a liquidity zone building up here, which came back down. It actually filled this gap, but because we've got the bottom of this fib level and this one, I just left the gap. But effectively, the gray one and the yellow boxes are one. They were just over the fib, but it came back down, closed a significant amount of that, and in reality, this now sits here like that, so it straddles over the fib level. But ignoring the fibs and ignoring the liquidity level, what we can see is after this prolonged, then on the 12-hour candle, it's 15, 16 candles of downward movement here, maybe actually a bit more. We've had a fairly strong bounce, but just look what we're running into. The 20 and the 50 EMA on the 12-hour time frame at the moment. We've just naturally been drawn back to those. We haven't cleared them yet. Not saying that we can't clear them, but we've rebounded back to them. We're having a little bit of interaction with them. And again, big decision here. We can clear that sort of, let's just call it 78,000. On this one, it's 77,800. Then, we can start talking about progressing and moving back up into the 80s and beyond. But the battle zone being right here, right now, and seeing how we have retraced to these in the past, only for them to be rejected, now is not the right time to be making that decision. You want to wait to see how these play out. And ultimately, there's only a couple of hundred within them. So, a couple $100 within it. So it shouldn't be too much waiting around from that. And again, could quite easily just be a retracement back and then a rejection and come back down, retest and have that discussion in around 74,000. Again, we've got to kind of wait and see. So this was just, I can close that one. That's just CoinAct. That's what I used to put those on. So we'll get rid of that. And then we got the old adage here with the rising compression that we had a look at, the breakout from it. Still obviously hasn't played out fully. Again, we were using this to sort of get levels here. This 73,000 was there. There was another one down here we were looking at 75,000, which we did lose. We didn't quite get there. We've had the bounce. But ultimately, again, even on the daily time frame, get rid of that one. All we've done, should I say, is we've come back to the 10 EMA. And we haven't broken it yet. Now, 5 hours ago in this candle, whatever shenanigans happen tomorrow when all the markets open again, 10's not the strongest EMA, so of course it can break. But the 10 held strong fairly well on the way back up. And on the couple of occasions that on the way back down, we've retested to this, it has rejected from it. So again, naturally you think, okay, we have come up to this level. There's a decision obviously to be made here. Recent history has suggested that the 10 is pretty strong. And if it isn't, it's not on here, we'll have a look at it on another chart. The 20 is usually there to pick it up, but the 20 is pretty close on this one. And then something that did get crypto excited over the weekend was Kevin Walsh was finally sworn in. And if you were to believe this article, it believes that rate cuts are on the cards, which doesn't seem to be the case. I mean, he's got his first talk in around about 20 odd days. And we've almost a 99.9% certainty that actually there's going to be no cut whatsoever. We've gone through these. But actually, it really doesn't look, in July, we're starting to talk about maybe increasing. September, increasing is getting higher, and we're talking about maybe a double increase. October, similar, and there's even a triple increase starting to come onto the cards here. December, the same pictures there. There is no meeting for the next sort of 6 to 7 months where actually anyone's even predicting that we're going to get any form of a rate cut. So I'm not necessarily sure where this article is. Obviously, everyone believes that Kevin Walsh is, the crypto guy. I saw some posts on Twitter, I didn't bother checking it, say that he has 100 million invested in cryptocurrency. I genuinely can't believe that it's true, but maybe it is. But ultimately, he has to manage the situation that he finds himself in, not what necessarily he wants to do. And with the prolonged situation that's been going on in Iran, oil has come down today, as you would expect, because of Donald Trump's statement, but it's still in the 90s. That is just pushing inflation up. Inflation is starting to bite. I do not believe myself that we're going to see a rate cut in the next 17 days, despite what Lawrence Leopold says. He thinks he has to cut. We'll see, I suppose, but it's not my view. I will be honest there. And then, we've got Bitcoin still, now we zoom out onto the weekly time frame. Fundamentally, nothing has changed. We haven't flipped bullish yet. 50 EMA comes closer and closer every week because it's moving down and price is stalling. So that is going to happen. Matter of fact, at the moment, that's sitting at 85,000. And, it's fallen from 98 when it last touched it. So it's not too much of a push up before we actually have contact and then that real kind of discussion. And also, let's not forget, yes, this candle, which is only 19 hours long, old even, is green. The last two candles have been red. We just need to give this a bit of time just to see whether or not this is ultimately playing out. And I don't want to rehash old things. You've seen me sort of point out the similarities in terms of retesting up to the 50, the 20 EMA, and sort of how that's gone in other bear market years, and the fact that it happens in terms of how much of we've seen an increase. Nothing what I'm trying to get at is outside of the parameters of what we've seen in other bear markets. And so ultimately it's just about patience, isn't it? Whether you either believe still that the bear market is on and we're in a 4-year cycle, or you don't, it's broken, so this time it's different, and it's time to get in. And that doesn't mean there aren't opportunities to try and make some sort of trades in between that, of course, but that underlying sort of position, for me, I haven't had the euphoria moment, eureka moment, whatever you want to call it, where it says, actually, I'm wrong and we need to go long. Yeah, that rhymes. Which kind of leads me on to this, I suppose, from Chris, and thanks for this one here. Yes, I did have a good weekend. But when would I look to get back into the markets for the amount that you're in stables? Any other cryptos I'm looking at, or would you go back into BTC? And then you've asked about a MicroStrategy. But if we just come back onto this chart and we'll drop it down onto some lower time frames. The one thing that I am curious about is this recent move back down. And it's kind of got me. I just need to draw a few things on. These aren't going to be exact, but just to kind of give us what we've been looking at in the past. Sort of kind of like that, isn't it? That's the channel we've been working in. We've had this sort of opportunity where we've seen that bounce back in April. We've rallied up to the top of this. We've had that rejection, and then as I talked about, is that 74,000? Is that us coming back down to this lower part and having that bounce from it? And then when you add on to that we've got the 50 EMA and we're sort of resting quite nicely on top of that, I do question whether or not maybe this is our move down, not our final move down, but our move down within this channel. And actually maybe we're looking at potentially a much swifter move to the upside on the short term. Why do I mention that? I genuinely am considering taking a portion of what I have on the sideline and just putting it back in short term, just to ride it up. Not leverage, just put a bit back in, and if we can get it from 78,000, we'll talk about the actual levels I'm thinking about getting back in at, up to whenever we get to this higher level, around about 85. There's a 10% uplift there, and I kind of feel like I've sat on my hands now for the best part of 4 months. And there's opportunities. Bearing in mind, I stare at these charts every day. I talk to you guys twice a week about it, which I could have probably done something a little bit better. Not risking it all, not going taking it all back in, but just putting some of it back into the market for that short-term ride up. So what would I be looking for that? Ultimately, I want to see how tomorrow opens. And I want us to get above 78. We get back above 78,000. What we're using on these charts here, sort of this level is 78,400, I suppose. That's when I close above that. I think I'll take the risk, and I'll look to potentially go long, as I feel like we're back into the upper half of this channel. We've retested, in my opinion, as close to the bottom as we're going to get from this channel. We've stabilized above the 50 EMA, and it feels like there's the move going onwards. And again, when you add into that, what the S&P or what the Nasdaq is ultimately doing, I don't see this ending anytime soon yet. Yes, I do think it will end, and I think it's going to end with a crash. Don't get me wrong, but I can quite easily see this climbing back up well into the 30,000s over the next month or two, and assuming that Bitcoin follows this, and it should. They're both risk-on assets. Doesn't always, I accept. Then there's an opportunity for that to be made. Now, to answer that second part of your question, is there anything else that I'm looking to go back in? I'm not at the moment. And part of me was thinking, do I actually just, move those stables or put those stables into, the NAS? And you can do that through sites like btcc.com, where you can actually use stables USDT to trade the NAS and the S&P. So there's a way of doing that. I wouldn't convert it back into fiat, because then I've got an issue. But that's where I'm looking. In terms of other ones, obviously I've been interested in Hype. I've talked about this now for the best part of 3 months about wanting to get in on it, but I want to get in on it whenever I feel the bear market is done. I think this thing will move. And so, no, I'm not going to go 100% into Bitcoin, but I will go majority into Bitcoin, and I will have some for the likes of hype, because I just believe this actually has a genuine purpose, a bit like BNB did. And I keep on making that referral back to when BNB started, way back when, so 2018, 2019. I kind of get the feel of just, this is what it feels like here, with a opportunity for a hell of a move up, with hype having that same, oops, I'll zoom back down now, kind of same sort of path. It's had, this sort of initial rally, move back down to the start of the bear market, but people are starting to see that actually it has some utility. And decentralized exchanges, they're still got legs for retail, and ultimately for using hype for fees, much like what BNB did. I think it's going to be there. So that's something I'd be looking at. Would I get into it now? Of course not. I mean, you just look at, I know I'm jumping around, but I need the RSI. It's too high. Not only is it high, it's actually also forming a bearish divergence on the RSI, which is, telltale sign that we're running out of momentum, and at some stage we are going to see some form of correction. So I would like to get this to come back down. I mean, if the stars aligned and we saw it come back down, $45, $40, just when I was trying to get some sort of movement back into BTC, then maybe I might put some in early. But at the moment, the plan would just be short-term position on BTC. And I get it. People say, Harry, there's probably a better opportunity to be made, but it's risk versus reward, isn't it? I'm just trying to steal a little bit whilst I'm waiting. I'm not trying to win the house back. And I just don't know when this is going to crash. It is overextended. And it's a crypto, it's far more volatile than an overextension on the NAS, with a much smaller volume. So this could correct much sooner than any of the other ones. So yeah, so I have to do that. Another one, Zcash, again, quite overextended right now. But it's just performed so well over the last 12 months that if this can, yes, I'd like to see it have a bit of a pullback, but if it can sustain some sort of momentum whilst the rest of the market is correcting, then I think again, this could potentially have some legs. So they would be the two things, Chris, that I'd probably be looking at. Notice I haven't said BitTensor there, and it's not because I'm not considering BitTensor. Obviously, we're such a BitTensor community, it's kind of hard not to be in it. It would just be a sort of similar kind of size allocation to what I would have done in the past. Sorry, what I've done recently, what I've kind of been doing, and that's just I want this community to win more than anybody. And if it does win, and I ain't in on it, I'm gonna be pretty gutted. But at the same time, I'm not as enamored by the ecosystem currently. So I'm just going to manage that risk there. And then you asked about MicroStrategy, and again, I think MicroStrategy is a bit of a difficult one, because I understand what they're doing, and I get the diamond hand mantra kind of stance of it all. We're just going to own it all. We'll never sell. And it does well. It does well in bull markets. It really does. And there's no reason to suggest that it won't do well in another bull market. But right now, I'm not particularly interested in it. One, I have the opportunity to put that money into Bitcoin itself, so I can own 100% of it instead of a small allocation of a stock which happens to just buy it, which could get diluted. I don't even know, where I sit in the pecking order of payouts, but as I've been looking more into strategies, variable rate series thing, that stands higher for the yields payouts than dividends from MSTR. So from an investment point of view, it doesn't seem right to me. Is there a level or price that I would think it's too tempting not to? Yes. I think we get down into double digits, the bottom of this bear market, which we never quite got, back in February. Pretty close, but we didn't get there. But we start to see this continue to fall. Hell, we get this down to, this level here, which is, I don't know, anywhere from $40 to $60, some sort of area there, then I think that's probably is worth a punt of putting it in and just riding it through the next bull market. So that's probably where I would consider doing that. Fear and greed. I think I was supposed to talk about this one a little bit earlier, but I mean, it's still in fear, despite the bounce. Well, it'd be interesting to see how today goes, I suppose, as well. But we were in extreme fear. We've kind of just sort of fallen back down after getting out into that neutral territory, and I think that just sort of summarizes again the fact that we are in this lower part of this channel at the moment. We get back above 78, start moving towards 80. I do think the fear and greed, or the greed side ticker, will start moving back towards the neutral territory. But again, we got to 83,000 and we got to 50. And that was a move from 65. The Coleman, the beginning of April base at 65, and then mid-May, 6-7 weeks later, we're 83,000, and yet we couldn't really get the momentum within the fear and greed index to sort of keep that greed rising. And I think again that's just general sentiment of just how the market is. I won't bore you with a lot of the stuff that Ben Cohen talks about, which I do agree with in terms of every little rally, we just sort of see people, you see the bears are dead, they're cooked, whatever. But the reality is, actually, if you're patient, you just know there's going to be some sort of retest. And for me, I do believe that if 60k is the bottom, that will be retested. It's just how it happens. And then we look at the ETFs, 6-day losing streak, as it closed on Friday, obviously not open today, so no inflows from today. We've had a net outflows over that period of $1.5 billion, which again, these are just words on a screen. But it is kind of just saying, well, actually, there does seem to be some sentiment shifting away. Is it sell in May and go away? Could well be. Maybe we'll start to see that materialize. Are investors just thinking there are better returns to be had in direct AI or other things, semiconductors, quantum computing, whatever? Certainly could be considered. And if we actually have a look at this chart here, try and get it so you can see it all. We're only interested in the left-hand column. Look at it now. So 3 weeks ago, it was all black. Now, except for 2 days with BlackRock, we're in the red every single day. That one's about to drop off tomorrow. So there's only going to be 1 day out of the last 15 in which we're going to have a positive day, which is not great. Canary in the coal mine, at the back end of the bull market, that is not what we were looking to happen. I don't think it actually even did happen. And don't think we ever got 15 red days in a row. Obviously, with this one down the 14th, we'd have to have a full week of selling this week before we pushed it to 15 red days in a row. But this isn't great looking at the moment. There doesn't seem to be the confidence there. And I accept there's arguments to be had that some of these sales are fairly small fry, 7.4 million, or even hell, 60 million, 33 million. They're not the biggest amounts. But the reality of it is there's no interest in buying at the moment, which is a problem. And what I would say, sorry, I should have mentioned on this, if rates remain elevated or start to increase, that in the macro picture is not a good thing for risk on assets. That is not a good thing for Bitcoin. And so, yes, we may need a couple of these meetings and suddenly we start to get some increases, but the wider, longer term picture would suggest that unless rates start to continue to fall, at some stage, we're going to have a problem, especially with inflation on the rise. And the only way that we really know to tackle that would be to raise interest rates. So, and quantitative tightening as well, I suppose. But anyway, we'll leave that one there as it is, right? Having a look at some of these on sort of, a bit more of a shorter time frame, if you will. So we've got Bitcoin daily time frame right now. And as we've said, we've had that move down. We've moved back up. Now we've got a few more EMAs within here. So yes, okay, we have cleared the 50. And I sort of said, if on the way up and on the way down, the 10 has worked really strong, but sometimes we lose it and the 20 kicks in. Well, just look where we wicked to today. Smack back on to that 20. So the relationship between the 10 and the 20, which has proven very strong since April, has worked really well in the last sort of back end of last week in terms of what we saw on Thursday. Still so far managing to hold true. Now, there's a different way of looking at it in terms of we are still above the 50 EMA. We're just getting squeezed between those. we may see that sort of explosion. Absolutely. It's why we can't just take EMAs on their own, but they help us paint that picture. And the reality of it is right now, despite the potentially positive news about the Iranian deal, despite only Bitcoin really being the thing that's been open this week, we haven't been able to get above that level and sort of really provide that conviction. Now, I have a feeling tomorrow when the market's open, we're certainly going to see price move up. We may see price move down actually because we've got that gap on the NASDAQ that we talked about. But ultimately, it's how tomorrow, maybe Wednesday's candle closes to really give us that picture. But we get above that 20 EMA, we close above it. That's that 78,000 level I was talking about, where I'm thinking maybe actually the risk to reward is on for that move back up. And again, that could well be the journey going. Unfortunately, we're just in that line at the sand. It feels like I have that every week. Maybe it's just the way we time these calls, but it is true. In terms of everything else, RSI relatively cool. I don't think I have any necessarily problem with that. We've got some vector candles down here, but we've got to get through this sloping resistance before that's of any concern. So not too much to worry about there. 4-hour time frame. Again, RSI, not exactly in the worst position. And then suddenly we're having a look at the price action. So this move up, we had sort of a bit of a battle at the 50 EMA. We have broken it. We're ever so slightly above the 200 EMA at the moment. We need to make that move and really kind of cement the line that we've had there. And what we can say on the way back down, which maybe is a little bit of a better picture than what you see on the daily, is the 10 and the 50, the 20 and the 50 have been what's sort of working for us, but we've actually broken above those now. And so again, if we get that positive momentum through there, certainly on the 4-hour candles, there's that opportunity for at least a run up to 78. But I don't think if we can stick the landing above 77,800, I think is what I called it right at the beginning of the first chart, then I think we've got that sort of base support, if you will, for that move to go a bit higher than that. And actually, there's no vectors here, but there's a decent amount of space for us to come back up and through. I accept the argument we also need to clear 78,000 just so we can actually take out that high as well. And so, yeah, that's that. Hourly, and there's much there, to be honest. I think we're just too quiet in things, so we'll just have to wait on that one. BitTensor, so this was the one with the 57 on it, 257 that is. But again, all that noise around about 275, and for the last 5 days, it's hard to see the vector, the EMAs within here. But we finally broke through. We've not got out of the cloud yet, but that cloud, it's the Gandalf line I'm really interested in. 297 it stands at the moment. But with the right side of all the other EMAs, the 20, the 10, the 50, and the 200, I'd rather be that north of them than south. And so, again, let's see how tomorrow opens for this one. But that's all I'm really interested in. 297, Gandalf line above that, please. And we can start to have that conversation. And again, suddenly, let's get rid of some of these. I'll just hide some for a second, actually, because... okay, I'll do. That kind of sort of plays in here, I suppose. And this isn't it has to be exact, but there is definitely some element of compression here. And the reason I've drawn that in is what's the level? 310, I suppose. So it's pretty close, 297 and 310, but we'd want to get above that as well. Unfortunately for BitTensor, I could just label every $5 as to why it's an important level, because these all add up to a much bigger picture of that, and that's what we need to get through. So that's why I feel like I'm almost cheating a little bit, because I can just give you $5 levels up and down each way and then call myself a genius. So yeah, that one doesn't necessarily work as well. Let's just put these back on. There we go. But yeah, okay, that's BitTensor on the daily and the 4-hour time frame. Nice to see bit of movement with vector candle here. Again, most things, these vector blocks here were all around the Gandalf line when we lost it, and we lost it fairly fast, sort of over the weekend or February, Friday. Um, so, sorry, that was actually last Friday. This is what I'm looking at this Friday here. So yeah, bit of work to do there. RSI is okay, it's fine, no problem with that. Now, strong bounce from it, come back, retest, nice vector candle with only 25 minutes to go. Can we climb up and make some sort of decent way to that Gandalf line, the 800 EMA? I'd even take stalling below it, conserving some of that energy, and then a punch vector candle through it. That would make me happy. But yeah, I think tomorrow and Wednesday, big days, just generally for the markets, and also with whatever comes out from Trump. Anything else? That's the NAS, like I say. This will reopen at 11 o'clock tonight, so a few more hours. It's the futures, so we'll see where that goes. But how far was it? There we go. Yeah, it was 85 off 30,000. Which, bear in mind, I mean, like I say, when we were down here, it's unheard of. We've done 8,000 in the space of 3 months. Not even 2 months, which is, at the time, it's a 33% increase, which is just wild, really. But the interesting thing, and I was watching Tino today. I need to go on the daily. So this might be a bit of a weird chart to understand. Matter of fact, let's just do it on this and this. Okay, let's change it to that. I want to get rid of this and this and that. Okay. So what we're seeing here, it's a weekly, it's a bit easier to see. It's a bit messier, but ultimately. So this is, Tino showed me this on his video, and this is as close a representation as what he was getting at. But this is effectively the S&P 500, and it's the stocks within the S&P 500 when they are above the 200-day average. Okay, so ones that are contracting versus ones that are expanding. And at the moment, 57% of all stocks, so round about 275, are above their 200 EMA. So what this is saying is that actually these have got legs. They're not contracting. We're not seeing the majority of the market contract and fall away. And so ultimately, the suggestion would be that the stock market generally still has legs to go. And you can kind of have a look at like the last time this dipped, so we had the dip in March this year with Iran, we know about. We had the dip in March of last year for the tariffs. What was October 23? Let's just overlay. Put that there and just overlay. Should have done this a bit better, shouldn't I? Here we go. So the white is the 200 line, and this is just the stock market. But you can see every dip ties in with when the market comes down. And right now we're climbing up. We've had the dip, we've got strength, and more of those stocks are now above their 200-day moving average tying in. So yes, that was a roundabout way of me sort of suggesting that this is, it looks overextended, but right now we're not getting to the point where, liquidity needs to be taken out of these. People are looking at something. It's the actual opposite, and people investing within them. So I can actually, fortunately, I suppose, can still see this climb. Now, the higher it goes, the more catastrophic I think the pullback will be, but we'll worry about that one another time. I have totally digressed from that, so let's just leave that for now. Looking at some of the other things, I mean, VIX is fine. Dixie obviously had a bit of a pullback, but it hasn't really lost anything major yet, but it's had that pullback off the news of good old Donald Trump. And as I mentioned, oil had that correction from the news. We'll just, could just be fun and games here, waiting to see. Gold's at relative lows, this year, pretty much lows for the year. So could we be starting to see a bottom forming for that next move back up. Silver's kind of had the bottom. It's starting to climb up. We can see lower lows, sorry, higher lows forming each time on this. There's no point looking at any of these because all close, apart from QBTS, because this is quantum. This is D-Wave quantum computing. And, this was down at $13 not so long ago. I think I mentioned I sold it as part of my pension pot just so I could get into something else. But it has been on a hell of a run at the moment. Potentially looking a little bit overcooked, so maybe it might have a bit of a pullback. But see how this pans out. I don't know when its next earnings. I mean, its earnings were... What day was that on? Middle of May, so a few weeks ago. Right, I think that's probably it. I've got to the bottom of those. And all I'll say is Bitcoin is starting to pull back a little bit more. So we're sort of 77,000, still sort of the low 77s. But for me, everything is going to just rely on how the markets open tomorrow. I'm thinking more of the US, so sort of 2:30 UK time, just to sort of see where things go and how they are really buying into this, and also what may come out over the next few hours for that. But don't be surprised to see the markets react positively to that. And with that, risk on assets such as Bitcoin should also do the same. But again, I suppose we'll just have to wait and see on that one. I think I'm going to leave it at that because I am ultimately rambling on. It's only 40 minutes tonight. Hope that's okay with everybody, but it's hotter than anything in here. Do try and enjoy the rest of your week. I'll try and get a video out on Friday just with kind of an update where things are going. Obviously, I'm going to be in Discord chatting away if anyone needs anything. And other than that, enjoy the rest of your week. I hope you've had a great bank holiday weekend, and I will speak to you all soon. Cheers now.